Hey everyone, this is Sarah Hobson. I am the founder and co-owner of Hobson & Hobson PC, and I have with me today my husband and my law partner, Chris Hobson. And I was just going to bring him on here to kind of pick his brain, and we'll kind of see where this goes. It's really some questions I've never asked him before, but I think people who are going through a divorce or who have been through a divorce or who've had to break off a serious relationship where a child was involved will really benefit from this interview. So thank you for coming on today.
Anytime.
All right, so I wanted to ask you, kind of jump into the meat of it. Some of you saw my prior post where I talked about how I found out I was pregnant at 19 and still went to law school with my daughter, who was 2 at the time, and also broke off my engagement to her biological father. At that point, we started, well, probably not right away, but prior to my graduation, we started a custody case to determine the custody of my daughter, my oldest daughter. And as a family unit, Chris, my daughter's biological father, and myself, we entered into an agreement that her biological father would terminate his rights so that Chris, who was my husband now at that point, could adopt her. And we have a really good relationship with him and his family, and I think we can really point to the fact that we get along because it's a conscious choice to make sure that my daughter grows up with a very healthy image of all of us. Not that we hide our flaws or pretend like we're perfect. We couldn't even if we wanted to, but we don't disparage each other. We don't tear each other down. We have each other's backs. And I went into this on the other video, but basically, children are creating their own identity, their own self-confidence at that age. And part of what they draw from in deciding who they are is who they perceive their parents to be. So it was really important to us to not tear each other down in her eyes, because we wanted her to grow up with a healthy self-image, to be confident, and not to let the fact that our relationship didn't work out be a hindrance to her having healthy relationships going forward. But I did want to talk to Chris and ask him and see what kind of insight we can get from him for people who are, you've ended a serious relationship, you have a child with someone else, you've ended a marriage, or you're thinking about it. How do you find someone who is going to be on board with your decision to be good co-parents, to be good human beings for your child? And I guess I'll just start from the beginning, and this will be very interesting to see how it turns out because I've never really asked Chris this before.
Excited.
So, okay, so when we met, we were neighbors on our law school campus.
Yep.
And when did you realize I had a daughter?
Right away. You asked me if I had a son. So, no, right away I knew. It wasn't anything that you were hiding. I think you may have thought that I knew early on. And in fact, actually, now that I think about it, I knew before I moved in because we shared a landlord, and the landlord asked me if I had any children because the woman that was renting the house below, I rented the above garage apartment, Sarah rented the house, and she asked me if I happened to have any children because the young lady that was renting the house had a 2-year-old daughter. So I knew going into it.
But funny little side story. So they somehow they were in their late 80s, early 90s, and the landlords, and they had told me that the guy that was moving in, he was very handsome and he had a son. And I was like, no way, that's so neat. The houses were separate, but they're on the same lot. And mine was on the street side, his was towards the back of the property. And I was like, oh, Haley will have a little friend to play with. It's like, this is so funny. And there was a little window in my living room. Well, it was I guess like a little keeping room. There's a little window kind of towards the ceiling, long, narrow window. And I was looking out and I saw these little legs going up the stairs to Chris's apartment. And I was like, oh, that must be his son. So when I met him for the first time, I said, oh, do you have a son? And he said, not that I know of. And
I wasn't aware of any.
that was a way to break the ice. But it was actually his little legs that I saw going up the stairs.
She loves my big calves. Anyway, good side story.
Yes. So, we started off as neighbors,
Right.
and
friends. I mean, we would just hang out, and I'd go play basketball, work out, hang out with the guys in law school. Pretty much every evening we played basketball like Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays, or something like that. And on the other nights we'd all go to the gym. And so I'd come back every evening. She was sitting out on the little lanai or patio, and I'd just go over there and hang out after I was done working out. And by that time, generally Haley was normally asleep. She was 2.5 at that time, but that's really how our relationship started.
so we started off as friends, and I remember having a conversation that, like, we were just friends, like, I wasn't interested. I think at that point I was so heartbroken. I was, like, writing men off in general. I was just thinking I'm just going to be a single mom. But there was a point where it did turn romantic. What thoughts did you have in your mind about dating someone who had a child with someone else?
Well, I just knew if I was going to date someone with a child, and I think it's important for anyone out there that's getting out of a relationship and looking for a romantic partner, or someone just to start a relationship with, and you have a child, whether you're a woman or a man, the number one thing you got to remember is that I knew going into it that if I was going to date Sarah, I needed to date Haley. And
That sounds really weird.
well, but you know what I mean, like, not date her, you get what I'm saying. They're a package, and I cannot be a wedge in between them. I can't be a wedge between Haley and her biological father. I have to be on board with whatever the mother, Sarah in this case, wants to do and support her, because that's the number one thing. If I'm gonna be successful at a relationship with someone who has a child, I have to be supportive and not pass any judgment. I mean, who am I to judge? I wanted to get to know her. I liked her as a human being, and I liked how she parented her children or her child. So those were all endearing to me. But I knew that if I wanted to date you, I needed to be a stable figure in the child's life as well. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. And that was another thing. Like, I was very concerned about introducing Haley to someone else. I was very concerned about it because I didn't want to have men coming in and out of her life. So, it was kind of hard to avoid her meeting him, being that we lived on the same property. He had to walk by our lanai that she biked and played in, and all, like, he had to walk by every time he would come or go out of his home. So going to class or, on the weekends, there was no avoiding the meeting. But it was, we did try to restrict our time together when we were, starting to date, when she had gone to bed. I didn't want her to get really attached, as I was just trying to really learn who Chris was and see what type of a future was there for us. What about when you told your parents about us? How did you broach that subject?
I mean, I just told them. I mean, I'm dating this girl named Sarah. She's they already had, I think my dad met you when we moved in, but either way, I just let them know that she had a child and I'm really interested in her and it's great, and the little child's 2.5. And I think maybe the way I handled the situation has a lot to do with my upbringing, because I mean, my mother and father, they don't treat her any different than any other grandchild. I mean, she was, as soon as I got involved seriously with her, then that was their first grandchild. And my grandmother, her great grandmother on my side of the family, when we all started having children together, I would say to my grandmother, are you excited about, your first grandchild or great grandchild? And she's like, I already got one. I've got Haley. So it's the accepting nature that I was raised in that probably helped a lot of it. But those are things that you need to find and see when you're talking to a man, talking to a woman after a relationship, is they have to be 100% on board with entering your family. You've already got an existing family. If they're not on board with becoming a part of that family, then that's an easy sign. And you have to separate, in my opinion, you'd have to separate, is this person willing to come into my family and be a part of it, or are they trying to start a new family?
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, because I had to explain to Chris from the beginning, like, I don't hate my ex. And I think that, and I wasn't going to, it was like, that's not the plan. The plan is we're going to try to get along for the sake of my daughter. And, I think that so many people, when you get in a relationship, you may feel obligated to really trash the other person or really tear them down to prove your loyalty and your love to your new partner. And from the beginning, I was just very honest that I don't hate him. It didn't work out, but I'm not going to, tear him down in front of my daughter. I definitely would vent. And,
Sure.
Especially when we were trying to figure out the custody side of it, it was very stressful and agonizing, but it was me venting to him in a way that it wasn't, when you're like upset with your partner, like the worst thing you can do sometimes is go to your family and rag on them about all their flaws, because you will forgive much and move on much faster than your mom or your dad will. So
Right.
It was the same thing with Chris, where things I may have been frustrated with in the situation, I was venting to you, but I also didn't want to turn him against Haley's biological father, because I knew we were going to get through it, because we decided we would. It was hard and difficult, but we decided we were going to make it work however we could for Haley. And that was another thing for me, that he understood this is a package deal. And if his parents didn't, I was floored how accepting and loving they were towards Haley right from the beginning. I didn't imagine that. What my standard was basically like, don't treat her differently. I didn't want her to be a step. We even started this saying, like, steps are for outside. We don't have them in our family. I didn't want her to be treated as less than or different than our other kids once we started having children. And from the beginning, I could see that wasn't going to be an issue. And that was so important for me. But going into it, I was concerned. I was thinking this may be something where I'm always having to justify Haley or show them what a great kid she is, but they really just totally accepted her and embraced her right from the beginning. And I think it is because of how we all were handling it. But then again, for his grandmother to do the same thing, to totally, especially coming from a different generation, to totally embrace Haley and our blended family from the beginning, that was a true blessing. And I'd really encourage you, when you are starting to date again, asking these questions. I feel like I kind of got lucky, but asking these questions: how do your parents feel about my prior children? How do having honest discussions, because if they're not on board, that's not going to go away necessarily without you trying to communicate with them and getting everyone on the same page.
And if I can add to that, because we see it a lot in our industry as well. I know we're talking about our personal story, but it's so important when you're going to introduce a child or start a relationship, a serious committed relationship where you've gotten past the point of dating, where you want to start blending a family, that you really have to separate, like she was saying earlier, the communication that you guys may have about your ex. Because of course you're going to say some things. You went through a tough time. You went through a custody battle. You went through a divorce where there was assets and money. These are all very hard and very painful things to go through. But the important thing is that you separate those and you can have those conversations, but you have to make sure that your significant other, the one that's coming over and taking on that role as a parent figure and an adult in that child's life, they have to be on board and positive, and they have to maintain continuity with the family unit. Because if they're just going to jump on your bandwagon and take what you're saying as negative and spew that out and hate that person, then you really got to consider whether or not that is good and that is healthy for your family. You need to find a person that can be able to be a sponge somewhat and take the venting. I heard the venting, but it didn't change my opinion about the biological father. Him and I are really good friends. Like, we've always been really good friends. I mean, it was obviously when you're first getting started, you got to get to know each other and all that stuff. But I I never took what she was saying to me and internalized it like it was my opinion. I wanted to develop my own opinion, and we could both vent, but never, ever, ever, ever would anything come across in front of the child. And I think when people allow that to happen, that's when toxicity happens. And it's easy to slip into. Mm-hmm. It really is.
And I think another strength that you had is, like, you were very confident in yourself.
Sure.
Like, you didn't have to put him down to feel good. You didn't have to you weren't jealous, right. Or, you were just very confident in our relationship and in who you were. And that's another character that you would need to look for when you're moving on. Is like, you do not want to bring an insecure person into your life when you have a child from a prior relationship.
Jealousy could cause a lot of problems in these things, because I knew going into this relationship that this man, her ex, was going to be in our lives no matter what for the rest of my life. I mean, because if I'm going to take on that relationship and take the step that I want to take in our relationship, he's going to be a part of my family. So why would I be jealous about that? I need to embrace it. And if there is jealousy, she would text him or call him, or I'd get home from class and she would be on the phone with him. Instead of me being jealous, what are y'all talking about? That's natural. Of course she's going to speak with him. Why wouldn't she? Those are the type of things that you need to see in character aspects of someone else, because of your new significant other or whatnot. Because if there is that jealousy and that kind of wondering what's going on and why are you talking to them, the question should be, why not? Why aren't you speaking with them? Because you want that open line of communication.
And that may be a flag that they're feeling
insecure.
They're feeling insecure somehow. So that may be a flag where you need to sit and talk to them. Maybe even get therapy. Talk to a therapist. What about this is making you feel insecure about our relationship? Because normally jealousy comes from a place where they're seeing a lack of something in their own life. So there may be something where you're not truly on the same page in some aspect that you need to work through that. You need to work through it. Don't ignore it. Don't sweep it under the rug and hope it goes away. It's not going to. If they are feeling feelings of jealousy or insecurity, if it's a relationship that you think is worth pursuing, then it's worth working that out.
Absolutely. Before
you get married or remarried, or before you get your child really enmeshed with this other person, because from my own experience, my mom didn't date a lot when she was a single mom. She did remarry one time, but when you meet these people, when I would meet my mom's boyfriend or spouse, and then when she got divorced again, that impacted me greatly. That was another little family unit that we had set up, and it was a very big impact on my life. So you got to be very cautious about doing that to your children. And then, another thing is, I guess people may wonder, okay, well, when did you let Haley know that, about your relationship with Chris, that you guys were serious? I don't know.
Ours was a little different, and I think it's always going to be age appropriate. I think depending on their age. With Haley at the age she was 2.5 maybe.
I think 2.5 when we met.
And so I don't
3 when we started dating.
Right. I don't know if she really knew that I was anything other than the guy that lived next door until we moved in together. Mm-hmm. So obviously once we decided. And to me, that was as big of a commitment as getting married if you're going to move in with someone that has a child. But we were already very committed at that time. And so I think it's age appropriate. Mm-hmm. You're going to have a different conversation with a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old than you would an 8 or a 9-year-old. You're probably going to, need to have that conversation earlier on with an 8, 9, a teenager. They're going to know who they are as soon as they come over. But it's all about age-appropriate communication and age-appropriate truth. We talk a lot about that in our legal field. Is what's the right time to tell someone? It's the age-appropriate truth. And
more of like the maturity level of the child.
Sure.
Some children, they might be 14, but they may not be mature in those areas. So, let me just say it this way. You know when it feels right, and I'd go with that. Another interesting thing is that I can remember is, I'd gone from being a single mom to, by the time she was 3, we were dating. I think it was that winter of beginning of 2008. But we were dating and, introducing her to Chris. And then when we moved in together, I was her only parent for the most part. She did see her biological father. He would come up, or we'd go down there, or we'd meet in Sarasota. But I was the primary caregiver. I was the one who was disciplining her and raising her, and I had the rules. And then to let someone into our little space that we had, I remember it was a little awkward at first. Like, I remember she did something and you had corrected her, and it was just, I remember just being like, it was weird. I was like, I didn't think of that when we were dating. So then it was a lot of communicating about the rules that I had for Haley, and she was my first child, so it was really against television and juice and sweets, and
she had a lot of rules.
I had a lot of rules back then. Now I have 4 kids, and yeah, the rules are not as many rules. They wear you down, but I think that's another thing is when you are serious, communicating your parenting style to this person. And for you, you'd never parented.
And another thing, let me jump in. I think it's getting back to tips to help you. Because as we tell our story, I keep thinking of tips. I knew when I moved in with Sarah, and I think you could agree, tell me if I'm wrong, I knew when I moved in that she set the rules for the child. There is no way that I could come in and dictate, okay, now we're moving in, I'm going to be, it's going to be this, it's going to be that, it's going to be my rules. I mean, there's another sign right there, right? So I knew when I moved in with Sarah that I needed to step back and just be the support, right? If she told me, hey, she doesn't get French fries for dinner, no French fries for dinner, sorry. I'm not going to argue with mom at this point. Now, today it's a little different. I might stick in my opinion sometimes.
It's way different now.
but at that time, it's not appropriate for a new significant other to come in and try to be the authoritarian or the authority figure in someone's family unit when you're stepping into it. So if someone's trying to come in and correct your child and parent your child and be the disciplinarian, that's a bad sign, and I would caution that. And again, like Sarah says, none of what we're saying are we saying that you should stop that relationship. What you have to do is have open communication and talk about it. Be aware of those things, because you can go way down the path of a relationship and it's too late. And then you're married and you never had these conversations along the way, and we're just helping you find these signs that we think in our profession and our personal life can help you find a significant other that's going to be committed with you, your child, and your family.
And I also want to say too, I've heard judges say some things about step parents who are getting involved when there's like a divorce or a modification of custody going on, and it really it bothers me because Haley calls Chris dad. Haley has called him dad since sometime shortly after we were married. We never told her to. We didn't even talk about it. She just did it. Like, I remember one day she just did it, and he's tearing up.
We came home from our honeymoon. So I was always Chris, and then as soon as we got back from our honeymoon, she was with my mom and dad for the week. We went to our honeymoon and came back. My mom, the first thing my mom said when I got home was, "Hey mom, how you doing?" She said, "Come here. She's like, she's been saying dad the whole time, referring to you." And it's like, and I guess in her little mind at that time, that our marriage, she was in our wedding and she was 5, so she was enough to comprehend it. I think that to her, like, transformed me into dad, I guess, is the easiest way I can explain it. And yeah, it was very emotional. It was touching. We never had to have that conversation with her. But again, the biological father was supportive of that. I mean, I can't speak for him. I can only imagine it probably was hard to think of that at first, right? And he probably had his own struggles going through that. But, we're all together and we're all a family. And so we're all supportive of each other. And it, and, 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 it, and,
we didn't want to stop her from saying it, and we also weren't going to force her to call him dad. It just happened, and we were like, okay, you're dad.
My mom was Grandma Sandy.
Yeah.
My dad was Grandpa Chris. And then as soon as we got married, it became Samaw and Papaw. So
they name you.
Right.
we spend so much time thinking about what we're going to name our children and what are they going to call us, what are we going to call our grandparent. They
let
that.
And let that happen from the child. That's where, again, going back to how we can help you. When someone's forcing that on someone.
I was forced to call my mom's husband dad. And it was awful. I hated it. And I did not want Haley to experience those emotions. I had never remembered calling anyone dad. Those words never came out of my mouth other than your dad or Sally's dad. And when I was told by my mom that I was calling this man dad, who I didn't even, that's another thing is don't just spring a marriage on them. I didn't even really, I knew they were dating, but I didn't really know them. And then it was just I don't even know that I knew ahead of time that she was getting married. She just got married and we moved in, and it was this stranger, and now I had to call him dad. So I would say, you've got to balance being cautious of introducing your children to people that you may be really interested in, but there's not really a future. Balancing that with just throwing them into your most recent marriage and making them call you dad. That is so damaging. And, another thing is she had, our situation is different than I think a lot of people's, because you were really the father figure. Once we moved in together and we were serious, we were engaged, we knew we were going to get married. We had our, the beginnings of a life plan. Chris was the one who was helping wake her up in the morning, getting her breakfast, helping get her to school, packing her lunch, admiring her artworks. He was already gradually stepping into that role anyway. But the thing about the judges I was going to say is, I think you've probably heard this too, is they get a little nervous, I think, when there's a step parent who is taking on a parental role.
Well, there's a big difference. There's a big difference on taking on a parental role and overstepping the bounds of the legal parent. So the difference, I would say, here's a prime example where I've seen judges get mad. So a step parent or mom's new husband or whatnot, let's just step parents. I don't like using step parents. Like we said, there's no steps in our family, but I'll use it for the sake of this video. So if a stepdad was to come in and take on the role of the coach for the basketball team or the coach for the football team, and that in and of itself is not a negative, I think that's a positive. Where the court system would get upset with you is if they did that without contacting the legal father, the actual dad, and asking them to be a part of that. Do you want to coach with me? Is it okay if I coach? This child asked me to coach. Would you have a problem with it? If you have a problem with it, I'll step away. And I think that's the difference, is when step parents overstep their bounds. And it's okay to become a parental figure, absolutely, but not at the, what's the word I'm looking for? Not to put down, or if you're
separate.
Right, not to separate. So I think that's a very important thing. It's not that step parents don't need to be involved. It's that they need to communicate with the other parent and make sure they do it together. I think a perfect world would be is if a step parent called, like if a stepdad called the dad and said, hey, let's coach together. In fact, Haley's 10th grade softball team, I won't say the name, but was coached by, the pitcher was the coach's daughter. Well, I learned about halfway through the season that the other coach was her stepdad. And I was like, holy cow, what a cool thing. And they've coached together. They still coach together. I'm friends with them on Facebook and stuff. So it's an amazing thing to see that.
And that's what we want for everybody. I mean,
and it's not easy, but these are things that I think if people are equipped with that idea, that they may not think that that's possible, but you would be surprised at what's possible if you give it a chance.
Mm-hmm. Hi guys, I don't know what just happened. I was editing the video and I noticed that the last portion of our video got deleted from my camera somehow. So I did just want to wrap it up really quick. I guess the camera decided we've been talking too long. I've gotten a lot of feedback from the first video that I did, and I got some requests to do some other topics. So one request I got was to do a topic on alienation. So I'm working to see if I can get a guest on for that, or we may do it through a podcast. So if we do it through a podcast, that person can remain anonymous, and I will maybe just film myself and they'll just be off the screen. And then also I'm looking for a guardian ad litem. If there's any guardian ad litems out there that would be willing to come on and let people know who are going through a divorce and custody case. We're trying to give people free content to know what to expect, to get some tips and tricks as they're navigating through a custody case themselves or life after divorce. Specifically for the guardian ad litems, what I'm looking for is someone who can let them know what to expect, how to present the things that they need to say to the guardian without being overbearing, also not being too distant from the guardian ad litem, what goes on when a guardian ad litem is doing a interview, and things of that nature. So if you're listening, you're watching, you're a guardian ad litem, and you would like to come on and also help by giving some free content to people in Georgia who are facing these types of issues, please send me a message. I'd really appreciate it. I also had someone reach out who's a really upstanding, well-known member of our community who has been through a divorce himself, and he recalled how difficult it was to talk about those issues with an attorney. So he's offering to do a mentoring meeting or group. We're not sure how we're going to do it, if it's going to be online or in person. But if you're interested in that, message me as well. But he's willing to really volunteer his time to mentor other men that are going through a divorce or custody case. Or maybe they're in the, trying to rebuild their lives after the fact, and just be there as a mentor. He's a really upstanding citizen, so it's an awesome opportunity. If you're interested, let me know, and we can decide based on the amount of interest if we're going to do it in person here at the office. There would not be attorneys in the room, so you could really just kind of hash it out. We can come in if you need us to, but it's really just kind of give you a real life example of one man's story. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great weekend. If you have any other suggestions for content, please let me know. What do you care about? What do you want to know? Let us know, and I'll be creating more videos next week. Have a great weekend.